Now, I'm not really a hand tool sort of chap, but there are a few occasions, and this is one of them, where a quick whisk over the edge like this with a hand plane wouldn't do any harm. The trouble is, of course, normally I don't have a vice. Normally what I do is I clamp boards like this. Normally I clamp boards like this to the side of my NFT. Well, obviously that's out of the option, out of the running for today. So what I'll do is what I did before I had any of that fancy stuff, is I just clamp it to a couple of blocks of wood. And use them to keep it upright. Then I can just use a couple of bench dogs in the actual bench, not in the NFT side, to keep that in place. And then with my little Stanley block plane, all 20 quid's worth of it, I can do a bit of planing. Okay, clean and square enough, I think. Alright, let's give that a bit of a sand. So we're not doing anything fancy here. A little bit of hand sanding just to clean up the edges. Take the very sharp edges off, but not actually round them over. Just knock the really sharp bits off, because it's in a bathroom and you don't want people to cut themselves on the edge of a shelf. So just a little bit of hand sanding. Start with a P120 on an old sanding pad. Yeah, 5-inch pad from a random orbital sander, just to clean things up a little bit. And we'll work our way through the grits to 320 and maybe 500, but we'll see. But yeah, hand sanding, joy. Okay, that was a workout. I've got arms like pieces of string now. Jeez. I might catch my breath for a minute and come back to how we're going to joint those in a second. Water. Give me water. While the dust settles and I catch my breath, I'm marking out using a £1 hinge gauge as a saddle square. Then, with the back of the shelf clamped upright, I'm marking the centres, first with a £12 Miroc ruler, and then a £1 tailor's awl. Then I repeat the process on the underside of the shelf to match. So when it comes to joining these two bits together, almost always I'll be saying domino, domino, domino. But of course that's out of the question for today's little epic. So instead I'm actually going to use dowels, plain old dowels. No fancy dowel jig for me. I was going to use my cotton reel dowel jig, but I can't find it. I've done something terrible. I've actually tidied up, which is a disaster, so I can't find anything now. So I used my little drill press drill guide that I made a little while back. And all we're going to do is, I've got my trusty Ryobi drill. I've marked the depth with tape. So we'll drill out these 4 in the underside of the top, and then we'll do the 4 in the top of the back, and then we'll pop them all together with a dab of glue and leave them clamped up overnight. But for now we can crack on with these. There's little room for error with a dowel joint, so with the holes drilled, we're dry fitting these before we commit to actual glue. Okay, so that's a relief dry fit done. That seems to work okay. It's a little bit bowed on the top, but we can pull that together with some clamps. So let's get a dab of glue on there, get it clamped up, leave that overnight, and then come back to this in the morning. We'll get a coat of finish on it, the first coat of finish on it, one of several. I'm using 10-minute PVA sparingly to minimise the glue squeeze, and I'm using the cheapest clamps I own to clamp the project up. Scraping away the glue squeeze at the end with a small piece of offcut. Okay, so we can leave that to set overnight, come back to it in the morning, and we'll get a coat of finish on it, coat of oil on it. Then once that's done, we can get the hooks on and everything, and get cracking. Next day, with the shelf unclamped, I have a moment of panic when I realise I hadn't checked the shelf for square before clamping it up. Phew. Then we can crack on with laying out the hooks. I'm using a piece of tape to gauge the height and have measured for the centre, but everything else will be spaced by eye. If it looks right, it is right. And I'm using the hinge guide and all to keep things tidy before drilling for the hook fixings, then drilling through the back for the shelf fixings, as these will be hidden by the hooks. Yeah, so with all the holes drilled and everything prepped now, it's ready for a coat of finish. I'm using just a regular Osmo Pollux oil on this. It's going in the bathroom. If you're really concerned about water, then Osmo do a finish, a primer, excuse me, called a wood protector, which is quite good. I've never really felt the need. This isn't, if it was going over directly over a bath or a shower or something, then sure. But it's just in the bathroom. It's not even over a sink. It's on a wall, so I don't think moisture is going to be a big problem. And if it is, well, I'll take it down and I'll refinish it. It's not a big deal for me. But what I'm using is just a regular Pollux oil in a clear satin finish, and we'll get that on, and then that can be drying. Fingers crossed we'll get another coat on first thing tomorrow and get this fitted the next day. Does get the grain popping, doesn't it? This time I came across Osmo, it was on an oak floor back when I was doing handyman type stuff. Always brings out oak really nicely. Lovely. Okay. We'll move this carefully to another room so it doesn't get all dusted up. I'll come back to that. Come back to that when it's had a chance to dry. Nice there. So the wax is all dried. It's had a couple of coats and it's been allowed to dry overnight. I've got to say I can't fault Osmo in these for this sort of situation in oak particularly. It always brings the grain up beautifully. So I'm just going to pop the little rope hooks on now. These are stainless. I'm using stainless screws. Again, I have total confidence in the Osmo that it will protect the wood from that sort of blackening. To be honest, if it doesn't, then I'll just refinish it and use something else, but I'm absolutely fine with it. With that, I've got some little stainless screws to go into this. So we'll just pop those in. I know I'm going to have to take these off again when it comes to fitting it, but I just want to finish it so that you can see it now. So there we are with the little hooks on. That's kind of it really for this this little build. I'm not going to do anything on the install of this because, to be honest, it's just, you know, a couple of screws into a wall. Plus, I think I mentioned earlier on, and please forgive me if I repeat myself in these videos, they're all shot out of sequence over several days, so I'm constantly sort of changing my shirt and trying to remember what I said before. I think I said it's. I think the one that I'm taking down is actually glued to the tiles with a grab adhesive, so that's going to be pretty ugly to get that thing off. And there will be language that you sensitive souls like yourself probably wouldn't appreciate. So I'm not going to do the install on that because, you know, it's just work really. But that's it for this little build using simple, cheap tools. I hope you've enjoyed that. Have the simple, cheap tools cause many problems? No, not really. Does the lack of Festool make my work any less accurate? No, not at all. I think it's worth saying that on a little shelf like this, accuracy is a relative thing. It doesn't really matter if the shelf is 640 long or 645. It doesn't matter if each leg of the shelf is 130 mil or 128 or 126. It doesn't really matter if the hooks are exactly evenly spaced, as long as they look in line and look reasonably even. You know, we kid ourselves that we're super accurate by using these fancy tools and equipment, but I have no such pretensions. It's a perfectly pleasant little workmanlike bathroom shelf, the sort of shelf you'd see pretty much anywhere, and really easy to make and cheap to do. I used a bit of scrap oak floorboard because that's what I had. You could make this out of pine or beech or ash or anything you like. Make it out of birch ply, it'll still look lovely. But that's it really for this week. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this quick and cheap little build. If you did, give the video a thumbs up and do share it freely amongst your friends. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Take care.